Hello, everyone, and welcome. We will get started in just 1 second, just giving everyone a brief chance to join from the virtual lobby. Thank you all for joining us today. All right, hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Benchmark Your SoD Maturity and Learn How to Elevate Access Reviews Beyond SAP, sponsored by Pathlock. I'm Sean Byers from SAP Insider, and I have a couple of quick announcements before we begin. This session is being recorded, and a copy of today's recording will be emailed to you following the session. If you are joining us live, the webinar is designed to be interactive. The question and answer text box is open at the bottom of your screen. After the presentation, we will have a live Q&A session and go through as many questions as time allows. We want to hear from you. We will also have a number of polls throughout the session, so please give us your input as these polls are deployed. And don't forget to take a look at the resources tab at the bottom of your screen. We have a number of resources that you'll want to make sure that you take advantage of. Now, let's turn it over to our speaker for today. Gerald West is the SAP Security and Control Specialist and founder of Carocon. Over to you, Gerald.
Thanks, Sean. Hello, everybody. My name is Gerald West, as said, and I am the advisor of Carocon. I've been working with SAP Security and GRC topics for over 27 years, lots of implementations, lots of audits, and crucially, the majority of my time has customer side. So I've walked in your shoes, and I have had these deep insights into what really challenges organizations and what really works in practice. My connection with Pathlock started as a customer. I spent 13 years as a Pathlock customer, watching the platform mature and deliver incredible value over the years. But I've also as an advisor now. So I help Pathlock deliver more value to its customers, and I also help customers drive more value from their investments in Pathlock and in controls more generally. And part of that is working with the user group to work with peers to improve best practices and a whole bunch of other thought leadership activities. Now, I just wanted to say hello facially, because I'm going to switch my camera off to conserve bandwidth. So the rest of the presentation I will be doing off camera. So let's start with the topic for today. The agenda, we'll start by setting out the why. Why we need to elevate access governance and why we need to go beyond SAP. Then we'll introduce a structured approach to elevation, a maturity model that will enable you to evolve your application access governance processes. And then finally, the key section will be looking at how we go beyond SAP. So we'll talk about creating a unified governance approach that doesn't silo your efforts by application. So while doing this, we'll look at some examples, particular world scenarios focused on access reviews. And access reviews are one of the most common and critical governance activities. And we'll do that before we wrap up. Right. So we turn our attention to the application access governance challenge. This is really capturing the perfect storm. And if we start by looking at the threats to organizations are increasing and escalating rapidly. When we look at processes, we're seeing an increased risk of fraud and error. Business processes are becoming more complex. There are more handoffs, more opportunities for mistakes or intentional misconduct. The controls that worked previously may not be sufficient in today's world. From a systems perspective, we're dealing with increased volume and sophistication of cyber attacks. The threat actors much more organized, better funded, more persistent than ever before. AI and machine learning has given them an incredible boost in terms of what they're able to do, their ability to find vulnerabilities. And then we have data. Data is emerging as a real attack objective for a lot of bad actors. And the increased risk of data breaches is front page news almost weekly. So whether it's ransomware, insider threats, or sophisticated external attacks resulting in exfiltration, these are the things that are the consequences have never been more severe, both financially and reputationally. To make things worse, attack surface is also increasing. And by attack surface, what we mean is the number of potential entry points for those threats. Interfaces that we have systems, interfaces, and connections proliferating. There are cross-system processes are increasing. A lot of our business processes are no longer in a simple one system scenario. You have SAP talking to Salesforce, Workday connecting to ServiceNow, cloud apps interfacing with on-premise systems. Each connection is a potential vulnerability. Exposure has also changed dramatically. Systems are much more exposed to the outside world than ever before. APIs, cloud services, mobile access, all of these are necessary for business agility, but all expand your attack surface. And then finally, users. Post-COVID pandemic, home working became a fixture. So now, the reality of managing employees within the corporate network anymore. We're dealing with remote workers, contractors, third parties, accessing systems from everywhere. The traditional security perimeter is dissolved. Another factor is scrutiny. At the same time, scrutiny is intensifying from multiple directions. Customers requiring, whether they're internal or external customers, they require more assurance data is being protected and processes are controlled. They're asking harder questions and they're expecting better answers. From an audit perspective, the scope and depth is increasing. I saw this heavily. Auditors are looking at more systems, asking more detailed questions and expecting comprehensive evidence of controls. What passed audits previously probably won't pass today. And all of this is being driven by regulations, by compliance requirements, whether it's GDPR, SOX, industry-specific regulations, or an increasing emerging framework of regulatory burdens. This is something that's just going to keep going. And it's not just compliance, it's also about making sure that we demonstrate this compliance continuously. And then finally, there's just rising expectations. We have expect a lot more. The audience, the users of our systems and reports, they expect enhanced user experiences and insights. They don't want to sift through spreadsheets. They want dashboards. They want intelligence. They want answers, not just data. Technology itself is actually raising the bar with AI and automation. These are here now, and the expectation levels are sky high and growing. If other departments are using AI, why isn't AAG, why isn't GRC? Your stakeholders expect you to leverage these technologies. And then finally, transformation. Business platform modernization efforts like S/4HANA migrations demand simplicity and integration. These create an opportunity to rethink how we do governance, but they also create pressure to consolidate tools, to streamline and integrate into business processes. So this perfect storm is that all four of these areas are increasing. Threats are increasing while your attack surface expands. Scrutiny is intensifying while demands are escalating. You're being squeezed from all directions. And this is why the traditional approaches to application access governance are beginning to break down. Just working harder is not enough. We need to work smarter, approach to our capabilities more systematically. And we'll talk about that during the course of this session. So here's a scenario I see repeatedly. One you probably recognize immediately. On the surface, things look good. You know, you've invested in an SAP-focused GRC tool. You have SoD rule sets configured, firefighter access, reviews running, internal audit team be happy, they see controls. You can demonstrate compliance for SAP transactions, and maybe your auditors have only focused on SAP historically. Within the SAP boundary, in great shape. But the reality is, the business processes don't stop at the SAP boundary. Your procurement process spans SAP plus Ariba for sourcing, probably plus Coupa for expense management, HR living success factors or Workday, not SAP. Your warehouse operations running on something like Manhattan WMS or Blue Yonder. Your finance close process touches SAP, but perhaps also Blackline for reconciliation, maybe something like Anaplan for planning. Each of these systems has its own security model, its own access controls, its own user base. And so is that there might be blind spots wherever systems connect. So imagine a user with limited SAP authorizations. They can't execute a full procure-to-pay cycle in SAP alone. But if you combine those limited SAP permissions with elevated access in, say, Ariba, and suddenly they can execute an entire procurement cycle. Your SAP controls didn't catch anything. No single system violation occurred. The risk emerged at the intersection. And this is the gap between what you're monitoring and where your actual risk exists. You know, the brilliant SAP controls are necessary, but in this emerging world, they are increasingly insufficient. We need visibility and controls across the entire process and landscape. SAP is increasingly essential. Right. So let's make this a little bit more concrete with a real world example. Let's meet J. Smith, a user in your organization. And when you run your segregation of duties analysis in each individual system, J. Smith appears completely clean, no conflicts detected. So if we go to the procurement process, so J. Smith in SAP Ariba has the ability to create and approve purchase requisitions. That's reasonable. Many procurement professionals have this sort of access. And so in Ariba alone, this isn't necessarily an issue. The goods then arrive at your warehouse, which runs on, let's say, Manhattan WMS. J. Smith has access to receive and confirm goods system. Again, in isolation, this seems fine. Someone needs to confirm receipt. Then finally, when the invoice arrives, J. Smith can post the goods receipt and match the invoice in SAP S/4HANA. Once more, if you look at SAP, if you only look at SAP, this user has relatively limited permissions, nothing alarming. But here's what your SAP-focused GRC will tell you. No conflicts detected. It'll be a tick in box, all clear. But the reality is there is a material weakness. J. Smith can execute an entire procure-to-pay cycle end-to-end across 3 systems. They can create the purchase order, confirm receipt of goods, and process payment, all without a single checkpoint or review. So this is a textbook SOD violation, but it's invisible to traditional controls because no single system shows the complete picture. Each system sees only its slice of the process. So users who appear compliant in individual systems may have dangerous combinations or access across your application landscape. And so it's a form of false assurance. And this is one of the crux items of this presentation. Now, so we've established the problem. Now, let's talk about why solving it actually might do need to address this. Well, if we take the first item, security, we need to prevent fraud and policy violations because, across our whole estate, not just within SAP, we have to detect cross-system conflicts before they're exploited, like the J. Smith example we just saw. And we also need to reduce our attack surface through some sort of intelligent deprovisioning, if you like, automatically remove this when it's no longer needed. If we then look at compliance, regulations don't care about our system boundaries. We need to meet SOX, GDPR, ISO 27001, NIST, etc. Beyond SAP. Auditors expect audit-ready evidence across all material applications, not just the core ERP. And increasingly, they also want to see continuous controls monitoring, not so annual access reviews satisfying auditors are certainly coming to an end. And then, efficiency is another point. Manual spreadsheet-based access reviews don't scale and they're error-prone. These are on their way out. User provisioning time needs to drop from days to hours, enabling business agility. And critically, we need to free up our internal audit teams to focus on strategic risks, not data collection exercises. They should be analyzing risk, not chasing down access lists. Finally, agility, and this is one that I'm really passionate about because one of the challenges we have as security and controls professionals is that no matter how great a job we do, we're always sitting in the box called necessary overhead, not the box that says strategic enabler. And whenever you have the opportunity in the box, we've got to seize that. And agility is the opportunity area. Your business, might want to adopt new cloud applications quickly, Salesforce, ServiceNow, new SaaS tools, but governance gaps often slow or block these initiatives. We need to have governance that enables rather than impedes. When a merger or acquisition happens, we need some sort of unified access visibility across the media. We must scale our governance without proportional headcount growth. Yeah, we can't simply hire our way out of complexity. So the integrated approach is where, each imperative represents this maturity dimension that we can systematically improve. And the maturity-based approach allows us to advance across all four of these dimensions simultaneously. So we don't have to choose security and efficiency or between compliance and agility. As we mature, we get better at all four of these. Okay, so let's talk about this maturity model. And this is how the structured way that we elevate. So this framework is a proven roadmap that takes us from where we are today to where we need to be. It's got levels, and these are probably quite familiar, 5 levels, and each level represents a meaningful step forward in capability. So if we start at the bottom, level 1, this is ad hoc and reactive. This is where many organizations start. You have manual processes. We're SAP only in our governance approach, and audit findings drive very much reactive, constantly firefighting, controls very inconsistent. Level 2, repeatable and documented. So at level 2, we've made some progress. We have maybe defined segregation of duties rules. We have these documented. We might conduct periodic access reviews, but the governance is still very much siloed by application. But still missing certainly the cross-system risks. At level 3, defined and automated. Level 3 brings automation. You have automated SoD detection within SAP, systematic user access reviews, and firefighter controls in place. We're proactive with individual applications, but still not yet looking across the full landscape. At level 4, managed and cross-system. Level 4, we achieve that multi-application governance with unified reviews and risk-aware prioritization. Yeah, so we can see J. Smith's cross-system access and take action. This is the target state for most mature organizations, and it represents a significant advantage. Level 5, optimized and intelligent. This is the summit. This is continuous monitoring, predictive, and integrated. Your governance becomes intelligent, anticipating risks before they materialize. Few organizations reach this level, but it does represent the aspirational state, and some will, especially with the advancements in tech. Now there are 3 flavors of value, which I'd like to draw your attention to, because maturity and value. So effectiveness improves the outcomes. So we've got effectiveness, we've got efficiency, and we've got opportunity. Effectiveness improves the outcomes. So, SOD conflict rates reduced, fewer risk events, better mean time to detect, mean time to respond. These are effectiveness metrics and value drivers. Efficiency improves through reduced provisioning, for example, lead time. It's really where the processes become leaner. That's the efficiency flavor of value. And then finally, as I touched on earlier, opportunity is where we enable the business. We move into that strategic enabler space. So faster time to access, improved business agility, increased innovation throughput, that sort of thing. So as you climb the maturity ladder, all 3 dimensions improve together. We don't have to the other. So good question for all of you to reflect on. Where would you place yourself today? Now, from what we see with the work we do with organizations, we see most organizations are at level 2, is what we tend to see. You have some governance in place, but it's typically siloed. Some organizations get to level 3, where they are carrying out some of the automation and getting some of that standardization and managed outcomes. So the key point is that it's a journey. Maturity is a journey, it's not a destination. You don't need to reach level 5 overnight, but you do need a clear path forward. And that's what this framework aims to provide. So let's look at the framework in more detail. One thing I've also included here is the idea of the application access governance processes. So when I look at application access governance, we do like to frame it in terms of the processes that organizations have to perform, and the extent and the quality of their performance in these processes maps very directly to obtaining. So if we start with the first process, analyze and monitor access, that's basically about detecting conflicts. So at level 1, ad hoc, let's man more conflict checks only during audits, purely reactive. At level 2, repeatable, yeah, you have documented SOD rules within each app, but they're still probably siloed. Level 3, defined detection in SAP. You probably implemented a tool with some scheduled scans. We're being proactive within that one application. And level 4, managed is the game changer. So cross-application conflict detection with risk scoring and dashboards. You can finally see J. Smith's complete access pattern. Yeah. And at level 5, optimized, you achieve real-time continuous controls monitoring with the can-do versus did-do analysis that anticipates problems before they occur. if we look at the next one, design and optimize access, that is fundamentally building better roles and optimizing the role assignments, if you like. So if we start at level one, roles are built ad hoc by app owners with no consistency. I think we're all familiar with the scenario. Role libraries per app, but they're disconnected. Level three creates a centralized role catalog, though still SAP focused. Level four introduces usage-based role optimization using peer analytics. So roles evolve based on actual behavior patterns. And then by level five, then you're having self-optimized roles that adapt based on behavioral patterns automatically. So here's an example. The third process, request and provision access, which is all about just getting access. At level one, email and ticket based, again, very familiar, slow and error prone. At level two, you have some basic workflow tools, but still very much separate per app. Level three, you're adding risk-aware routing with SoD pre-checks in SAP. You catch conflicts before provisioning. And typically, we see this where organizations have implemented a GRC tool to includes the compliant provisioning element. By level four, you have that pre-submission simulation across apps with risk-based approvals. Users see conflicts before they even submit, and this is across multiple applications. And then at level five, you have some sort of dynamic policy enforcement with AI-assisted approvals that understand context. Just give you an example of a level five feature. The fourth process, review and certify. This is what is commonly known as user access reviews. So level one, it's death by spreadsheets, painful and relatively ineffective. Level two moves to those sort of quarterly reviews per app, still siloed, still probably spreadsheets. But level three brings systematic campaigns with completion tracking, organized but still periodic. Level four then brings those sort of unified campaigns, triggered. You can review what matters when it matters. And then level five achieves continuous certification with auto revocation. Certification becomes ongoing, not just episodic. And finally, the favorite of many people, the firefighter process called elevate and control access is what we call it. Some people call it managed privileged access as well. So at level one, shared IDs logged, for audits or spreadsheets, perhaps it would be. Level two, implement some sort of firefighter mechanism in SAP, but manual tracking elsewhere. Level three extends firefighter enterprise-wide with audit-ready logs. Level four integrates the privileged access with continuous monitoring across all systems. And by level five, you have that nirvana of zero trust privileged access with credential vaulting, where the privilege is verified in real time. So the thing to notice is how each level builds on the previous one. You can't jump from level one to level four. You need to walk through the stages systematically. But also, I would also mention that even moving from level two to level three, or perhaps level three to level four, would deliver significant value. So to summarize, most organizations probably at level two, maybe three. The goal of the session is to really show you the path to level four, managed cross-system governance, and give you perhaps a little glimpse of what level five might look like in some areas. But why do we need to do this? There is a price of being at a low maturity level, and it's not just the fact that it's expensive. It's also self-reinforcing. But manual process creates a backlog, and those backlogs will start to drive shortcuts, and these shortcuts then create exceptions. And these exceptions then create audit findings, and the findings then drive more manual work, and we go through this cycle. And breaking the cycle requires some sort of structured maturity advancement. Now, we've got a number of points on the slide. I'm not going to go through all of them to dive into the characteristics of level one and two to illustrate some of these points. So if we look at level one, it's characterized by chaos and reactivity. Manual conflict checks happen only when triggered by audits or incidents. You're always behind. Annual spreadsheet exercises achieve perhaps completion rate because nobody has time, and frankly, there's no accountability. Governance is SAP only or siloed per application with no cross-system view. Standing exceptions tracked in maybe shared drives or email. Good luck finding them during an audit. Shared IDs are logged manually, if at all, creating an absolute nightmare in accountability. There's actually needed. So typical level one indicators is, you can't answer the question about how many SOD conflicts exist without running manual queries. Access reviews take 8 to 12 weeks and require constant nudging. Audit findings consistently focus on lack of evidence as a phrase and untimely reviews. When you hear those phrases, that's not that we're still at level one. The impacts are pretty severe. Audit risk means material weakness is likely, and compliance cost is baseline, probably maximum. So the effort is significant to just keep up. At level two, repeatable and documented, there is some progress. There are documented rule sets per application with periodic automated scans, with campaigns per app, maybe achieving perhaps about 50 to 60% completion rates, which is better, but still not brilliant. You're mature within SAP, but just emerging into one or perhaps two cloud apps. Controls are tracked in your GRC tool or dedicated database. Firefighter is implemented in SAP, but manual elsewhere. Role libraries exist, and you're not usage data, though not analyzing it yet. So yeah, audit risk is reduced, and findings are limited to non-SAP scope. Compliance cost drops quite significantly, and the thing to watch out for is many organizations plateau at level two because it's inputs good enough audit. Yeah, and that's what we're seeing, at least for SAP. And this is a dangerous trend, which will need to change quite dramatically. So as cloud adoption accelerates, and it is accelerating, the governance gap widens. So we're managing SAP well, but Workday, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Coupa, Ariba, and a dozen other business critical applications probably ungoverned or poorly governed. So the level two trap is thinking of part of it. And meanwhile, business risk is migrating to the applications you're not monitoring. So the good news is that most organizations at level two have the foundation to move to level three. They've probably invested in some processes, tools, and some automation. So we just need to extend that capability across the full application portfolio and introduce cross-system thinking. So let's look at the so if we look at automation that happens as we ascend to level 3, 4, and 5, I'll just quickly rattle through these. And I think we mentioned them earlier, so I won't go through that again. What we see is a couple of trends. One is increasing automation. The other is the cross-system and cross-application conflict detection, usage-based information to be brought into whatever we're doing. And at level 5, you start to have the AI and intelligence-driven information as well. So crystallize it and make it more practical. I think understanding maturity levels is one thing, but knowing how to advance is another. So your path depends on where you are today. And this slide shows advancement tracks, each with clear milestones and expected outcomes. So you've got the stabilized track, which is the level 1 to level 3. And if you're level 1 or early level 2, track 1 is definitely the path. This is about stabilizing SAP governance and beginning to extend beyond it. Probably about 12 to 18 months for that full maturity cycle. Again, this slide you'll be receiving, I probably will, in the interest of time, probably won't step through all the points on it. But the key message is that for each stage of where you are, there is an optimal path to follow in the maturity model. And that's the key message of this slide. Okay, I'm going to now move over to the going beyond SAP dimension. We've covered the elevation piece. Now we want to talk going beyond SAP. So if we go back to our level 4 imperative, it addresses this fundamental question about why go beyond SAP. And one of the stats that's interesting is that in some scenarios where we've seen a fairly heterogeneous environment, it can be about 50 to 70% of the risk can actually exist between systems rather than within them. And so organizations at level 4 detect a lot more violations than level 3 organizations who focus only within SAP. So in that sort of scenario, if you're only looking at SAP, you are missing a big chunk of your risk. So application categories, if we look at the application landscape we need to govern, these systems that interact with the SAP core, we've got a whole range of them from in procurement systems, financial management, HR, etc. And each of these play their part in the cross-application risk scenarios. So if we take the procurement scenario where a user can create a PO in Ariba and post a goods receipt in SAP, approve an invoice in SAP, or whether we're talking about a user who posts a journal in SAP but executes a bank payment system, or the HR example where a user can change employee master data in SuccessFactors and approve payroll in the ADP solution. So all of these are served by the appropriate level 4 mechanism. And this slide shows that. I'm going to talk a bit about technology. And I'm a huge believer in the power of technology, the capabilities and the quality of the processes. But I want to put this little caveat in, is that technology is only effective if you do other things. So just investing in technology on its own is not enough. You need to have the right process design, stakeholder engagement, data quality, organizational change management, and continuous improvement discipline. So, we've seen organizations invest billions and at level 2 because they ignored that 70% of, the change management, etc. And conversely, I've seen organizations with modest technology investments achieve level 4 through excellent process discipline and change management. Technology is the enabler, not necessarily the whole solution. So keep that in mind as we discuss and wax lyrical about the technology capabilities. Yeah. So let's walk through what technology we need to do. Requirements are basic. We talk about documented SoD rule sets, basic workflow tools, reporting capabilities, application-specific access management. This is foundational tooling, spreadsheets and point solutions. Yeah. At level 3, this is where we bring a level of centralization. So a centralized AAG platform for the SAP ecosystem, an automated SoD detection engine, a workflow engine for access requests, FIDA, access, and connectors for SAP native applications as required. So this is where you're consolidating and automating within SAP. And then at level 4, the requirements extend enterprise-wide. So an enterprise application access governance platform with numerous connectors to non-SAP systems, an identity correlation engine that links identities across applications, cross-system SoD rules, unified review orchestration spanning all applications, usage analytics to optimize roles, and integration APIs for extensibility to have that level of flexibility. This is basically comprehensive cross-system capability. Well, with level 5, yeah, you then add some intelligence, the CCM module for continuous monitoring, machine learning and AI for anomaly detection, perhaps analytics for predictive insights. So there are a whole range of capabilities. Now, Pathlock is a great example of platform that enables these maturity journeys to happen, all the way from level 2 to level 5. Yeah. And so if we look at the level 1 to 3 track, that what I call the stabilized track, it has pre-built SODs with over start from native SAP connectors mean rapid deployment. Unified UX, provides a level of consistency across all governance activities, and the firefighter is built in rather than bolted on. So these compress the timelines potentially, but down to 12 months. For the level 3 to 4 jump, the instrument track, as we call it, Pathlock offers that 100 plus beyond SAP, which is a very powerful extension capability, enabling that rapid expansion across the portfolio. The cross-system SOD engine is purpose-built for detecting conflicts like the J. Smith scenario. Identity correlation works out of the box, not requiring months of custom development. And then unified review campaigns can orchestrate across all applications seamlessly. So time from 18 months to 12 to 15. And then, of course, for those few organizations that are going from level 4 to level 5, the optimized track, Pathlock CCM module is native to the platform, not a separate product. So the can-do versus did-do analysis is actually built in. You have machine learning-based anomaly detection. You can learn from your environment. And the API ecosystem then enables integration with the broader security stack. So that allows level 5 achievable in 6 to 9 months rather than remaining as aspirational. But the key point is, in terms of the critical success factors, maturity, even with the right technology, maturity advancement requires executive sponsorship, business ownership, process discipline, change management, and continuous improvement. Journey by handling that 30% brilliantly, but you must address the 70%. Yeah, it's making great use of the tools is what leads to the value and the maturity. It's not just having the tools on their own. Okay, so when you're thinking about platform decision, you could ask yourself, does this technology enable level? Does it have the connectors, the intelligence, the scalability? And these are the sort of questions to have in your mind. Right. To now use an example, and we're going to go back into our access governance processes. So if we look at the 5 processes we talked about earlier, I'm going to focus on the analyze and monitor access and the review and certify access in order to illustrate some of the points we want to make. Let's start with analyze and monitor access. If we look at this, we have 5 core steps within the analyze and monitor access process. We've got collect and consolidate access data. We detect and analyze SOD conflicts. We generate alerts and reports, events across systems, and then we remediate and track conflicts. Now, if we look at the detect and analyze SOD conflicts step, we've fleshed it out into the sort of key activities. And one thing to note in terms of the extensive maturity model that we've developed is that we've actually mapped a lot of these activities and capabilities at each activity level to features and capabilities in products as well. So that's a really important point. Thinking about what should I implement, what feature or what activity should I focus on, you can map it back to the process itself. If we look at the scenario we talked about, the simple scenario of a basic procurement risk, and we're going to pick on procurement quite a bit simply because procurement gets a lot of attention. It's money going out the door, so that often will be a process that you may even start with. Simple homogeneous environment, authorization concepts are the same, even if you've got two different SAP systems. All access risk are monitored by the same team, so you can manage that level of cross-system risk. But if you now typical SOD rules that we have to. If we now look at a homogeneous environment where you have part of the procurement process is executed in SAP Ariba, and then some of it happens in S/4HANA. So the upstream process happens in Ariba, downstream happens in S4. There are a number of challenges. One is that the authorization concepts are very different. And you have manual checks, error-prone, user IDs may be different across systems, and IT organizational silos may exist, human team governance across the two. And these four challenges are significant, and these are why you need a structured approach to handling this type of scenario. So let's dig into it a little bit further. If we look at one, we have the complexity around cross-application and multi-application. You can see that at the identity level, coarse-grained, even at the identity level where you have the coarse-grained checks, risk management, you have different concepts. So with SAP ERP, you have the users and roles, but you have a whole variety of different concepts across applications. But of course, this divergence is even greater when you look at the fine-grained risk management scenario, where you have completely different currencies of access that are, and so we have to find some abstracted currency that can be used across applications, and that's where we abstract it up to function, to business function, and yet the business function contains all the detail and rigor of the base currency from the application, but yet you still can represent this across multiple applications. So I'm just going to show a few example screenshots. I'm conscious of time, and I'm going to run through just to give you a flavor for the sorts of things that you can do. So here's a dashboard from Pathlock Cloud, showing the risks over time, but also showing some key metrics around the SOD risks, looking at it by priority, by process, by compliance framework as well. You can dive into risks and look at the overview of the risks descriptions. What we found historically was these descriptions really instructive for managing your risk with the real world examples, for example. And if we if we look at a risk between the main purchaser, and this is the ERP, the SAP section of it, and we can see the traditional authorization objects and values. And then the start of the conflict is Ariba. And again, we see that we've translated that into the Ariba-based currency of access. And yeah, here are some of the screens where you can see that violation record across the systems. It's important to be very aware of which part of the procure to pay process happening in which system, and this might change over time. So monitor that, update your rule sets accordingly. More example of SOD rules that are across system. I'm going to skip through a lot of these because I just I want to get to the end. Again, you have these slides, so you can actually go through these in a little bit more detail. So these are just examples of the depths at which you can cover non-SAP applications and cross application risks. So last example is around the review and certify access process. Again, there are specific steps in the process, and what we've done is we've actually teased out a couple of these steps into their detailed activities. And again, at each level, each activity, you how enhance the activity using the technology you've got. And that can give you a really focused way of elevating at a granular level. So again, some sample screenshots from Pathlock Cloud showing, and I'd highly recommend that you get a demo of the Pathlock user access reviews tool certifications to see the level of flexibility around setting up campaigns and also about how you can run the actual reviews themselves, scheduling the reviews. So I'll skip through some of these slides. So that we get to the end. Employees, yeah, so these are just more insight. I think one of the key features of access reviews, and this is probably a key point to note, is quite often managers may not know the users that they're being reviewed, who they're having to review, and don't have any context. And one of the things that is done with this is to deliver some context around have they used the access, what is the level of risk related to the access, and just gives the reviewer more context and allows them to make a more actionable decision. So these are sort of things that we have. And yeah, I'm just showing a few more features, which I will get to. So now I just want to leave you with this equation. So this is something that I find particularly useful when you're evaluating any initiative, any project, any purchase, any step you're making, is what's the value we're going to get from this? And one simple way of framing the value is the dream outcome multiplied by the likelihood and all divided by time delay times effort. So the dream outcome, it could be your audit outcomes or reduced, or however you frame it, whatever you're targeting. The likelihood is a key thing because you have a number of levers to affect the likelihood. And that's something to really think about. If it takes too long, or if you wait too long before you take action, or it takes too long to implement, both of these will erode the value, as of course will if it's cost too much or requires too much effort. And finally, having this value consciousness is something that I found is really, really useful. And there are a number of ways of calculating the cost savings and doing your modeling. But the key point I would make in this slide is to remember that maturity drives metrics, and we have a very detailed mapping of maturity levels and different metrics and benchmarks we expect. And then the metrics drive cost. And these mechanisms give you the way to actually model that. So finally, key points to take home. I think the first thing is it's really important to elevate access governance more generally, but access reviews in particular. And it's very important to have a wide application coverage. The new reality demands that. And the maturity model provides a structured way to achieve this elevation. And extending access governance beyond SAP is becoming an absolute necessity. Now, it's important to always think of the business value of what we're doing. And there are three flavors that we should bear in mind: efficiency, effectiveness, and opportunity. And this value flows from maturing our processes. And technology then enables us to mature our processes more effectively. And Pathlock is a great example of a technology platform providing that technology suite to enable this maturity journey and enable the cross-application governance. So what I would encourage you to do is to start your journey and by assessing where you are in terms of maturity. And with that, I will stop, and I'm glad at least I left a few minutes for questions.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Gerald, for a wonderful discussion. To our audience, just as a quick reminder, please make sure to visit the resources button at the bottom of your screen. You can check out the 9 best practices for SOD implementation and much, much more. Also, as another reminder, you can submit any questions that you have by using the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. We do have a couple of questions here locked and loaded, so let's jump right in. First off, how does cross-application SOD solution fit in with our existing IAM or GRC systems?
I think that's a really good question. And I think the key point is that it needs to integrate with whatever you have. That's the ideal scenario. And there are a number of ways in which it can do this. So if you, depending on what tools you have, there are a lot of options. If I take Pathlock as an example, Pathlock integrates very well. Pathlock plays well with a lot of IGA and GRC tools. So being able to extend beyond SAP is one of the things that Pathlock does particularly well. So if you already have, for example, SAP GRC, there is an AVM solution that you can extend to widen your reach beyond the SAP boundaries. If you're using Microsoft Entra ID or SailPoint, again, Pathlock integrates very well with those and gives the fine-grained checks to go to higher levels of maturity in some of the process. So it all depends on the scenario, but yes, the key principle is integration. Make the best use of what you've already invested in and enhance it.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question here. Our applications have very different role models and data. How do we build a unified SOD rule set across diverse systems?
Yeah, I mean, this is another great question, and it's I think it's all about, comes back to the point around common currency. One of the big challenges in cross-application governance is the fact that you have different currencies of access. They have very different security models, and sometimes they also have different identities. So it's about doing that structured exercise of mapping the access models and coming up with that common currency of business function on the one hand, but also, having the identity element. Now, Pathlock tends to cover both of these really well because it has the identity correlation built in very well, and also the rule sets that are already translating the currencies between systems. But those are the elements that should be managed to do this.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you again. This really has been a wonderful discussion. I want to say a special thank you to our esteemed speaker, Gerald West, for joining us today. And as a final reminder, this webinar will be available as a webinar on demand, and all registrants will receive a link via email. Finally, a special thank you to our sponsor, Pathlock. And on behalf of SAP Insider and Pathlock, we thank you to the audience for your time, and we hope that you have a great day.